Hello and welcome to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. Today, our special guest is Nick Tumilowicz, and Nick is the Director of Product Management Solutions of Itron. Hey, Nick.
Hi, Sean. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you being here.
So what kind of products are you managing? What is Itron up to?
So Itron is managing a lot of energy, so gas, water, and my particular area of focus is electricity.
Oh, we like electricity better than gas. Yeah. And what was the other one you said? Water?
And water as well, yeah.
So like
water is a precious
hydroelectric?
resource. Specifically, Itron is really focused at the edge with the consumers, helping investor-owned utilities, municipalities, and cities to really do a lot of the measurement and verification and distribution of elements like water, gas, and electricity.
Elements. I thought the elements were earth, wood, air, and fire. Am I missing something? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, in the pagan sense, yes, you've got it nailed. That's exactly right, yes.
Okay, great. Nice to know that there's another pagan on here. So, but yeah, all seriousness aside, as one of my professors used to tell me a long time ago, what are you doing with electricity then? Just because we are here to talk about solar and storage, and
Sure.
you do stuff with electricity. And so how does that all tie together?
Sure. So this is a fun question and a podcast for me because most of my life has been in solar and storage based on deploying that for consumers like you and me and all the listeners on the call. So what Itron is doing is for the past 50 or so years, we're deploying meters and telemetry and networks at the edge of the grid. So I'm sitting in a building right now in Northern California, and there's an Itron meter here on an Itron network, and it's reporting all that information back to the utility to say, this is how much energy is being used at this building, right? So that's the historic kind of method for advanced metering infrastructure. But now, these days, we have PV on the roof. We have a battery in the yard. I see DC power fast chargers for level 3 and level 2 chargers that are out in the parking lot. And so Itron is very focused in our group in shining a light on the darkness at the edge of the grid to say, oh my gosh, this parking lot doesn't have one EV charger anymore. It now has 10. It has a demand of 5 megawatts. And that we can measure that in conjunction with the limitation of the grid, which is the transformer that sits upstream. So we're working to manage that so that way we can accelerate decarbonization, accelerate renewables integration like solar and storage, and effectively accelerate decarbonization goals.
So one of the things that you said a couple of times already is the grid edge or the edge of the grid. And most of the listeners here are flat earthers, and they're kind of afraid of going off the edge of the earth. So maybe you could explain what the edge of the grid is.
Yes, the flat earthers. Okay. For those of us that are more orbular spherical with celestial bodies hovering around with gravitational force. So I think the notion of the grid edge is you and I are sitting, and most of the audience, I would imagine, within a facility, within a structure, and the electricity kind of stops here at this light switch. That's the edge of the grid, as opposed to further upstream where there's a meter sitting outside of the house. Further upstream, you have a transformer. Further upstream, you have a substation. Further upstream, you have transmission and distribution and big central power plant generation. So we're not upstream there. We're down at the edge. Yeah.
I guess the other edge of the grid, because there should be different edges, and the other edge would be where the photon hits the solar cell. But I know that's not what you're talking about. Yeah, so you're talking about where electricity is used.
Now, on that note, because I see you have a lot of photovoltaics behind you, a lot of solar and wind and batteries are transmission connected or distribution, medium voltage connected. We're talking, tens of thousands of kV interconnection. What I'm talking about is more like 12 kV and below, like 240 volt. That's how most people think of residential and commercial, maybe 480 volt solar and battery storage. So that's the edge if you want to get specific, 240,
Yeah.
480.
Yeah, sure. Oh, I mean, I think most people even think that 120 volts is, high voltage electricity.
Mhm.
Just like somebody that plugs in the vacuum cleaner or the hair dryer.
Yeah.
So, okay, good. So the grid edge, and I know that a lot of people talk about that. And so I just thought it would be kind of interesting to talk about it. So you have these meters, and are you working with like virtual power plants or demand response and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. So for about 30 of those 50 years, Itron has been doing energy forecasting. So this is really instrumental to say, oh my gosh, how much energy is going to be consumed by Sean and Nick and the rest of the audience? And based on that knowledge, I know that I can distribute that much energy. So that way we're managing the flow of electrons. How much solar is going to be deployed, so that way we know how much reverse power is going to come back across the grid if it's not satisfied and met by those immediate loads. So that's an example, I think, of how we're kind of using the meter in the context of solar and storage.
Yeah. And so tell me about, like you said, you're with a meter right now. What is the meter doing?
Sure. So again, historically, it's been doing meter reads, meter to cash, as we call, for billing purposes. But now it has the ability from a DER management, solar and storage management, EV management perspective.
So DER, distributed energy resources.
Distributed energy resource. Yeah, and that could be the solar on your roof. It could be the battery in your garage. It could be the EV, and it could be the air conditioner in your backyard. It could be the pool pump. It could be your water heater. Yeah.
Sources and loads and things that you could control, I guess. Yeah.
Controllable loads, yes. And some of them are binary. They're very on off, like thank you for letting the utility adjust your thermostat. Itron is helping provide the technology to adjust that thermostat, to connect to that thermostat, to say, wow, you have 1 million thermostats on this particular grid in and around this city. And gosh, it's a hot summer day today. And we need to do something about managing that load, because I need to tell all these central power plants to start running at a certain percentage. But at the same time, I notice that I have 1 million customers with thermostats and hot water heaters that I can adjust. And on top of that, I also know they have X amount of solar. So that way that will tell me where I can operate my central power plant. So that's one example. So you asked where we were, and I think I got distracted. 30 years of energy forecasting, about 15 years we've been doing demand response, which is dispatching those binary loads, those things you can turn on and off. But now in 2025, and we've been working on this for the past decade, is let's look at things like solar, batteries, and EVs, and they're different than those other loads I mentioned, because these are 4-quadrant bidirectional power electronic devices that you can throttle. And you can ask really wonderful things from them, like, give me reactive power. Please help adjust the frequency on the grid. And we can call upon those with a energy resource management platform like we have at Itron in order to help, manage those loads, all the while kind of holding hand with the customer, the consumer, to make sure they're a part of that paradigm.
So great. So how would somebody work with you, or how would somebody use your products? Like if there's a listener right now that says, oh, I need to get an Itron system, or, how would that work?
Today, Itron is providing a lot of the technology through the electric utilities. So, we might be sitting in a particular area within the US, and that utility has an EV managed charging program or a behavioral program. And Itron is providing perhaps the website. It looks like the utility website, but you can say, hi, I just moved into the neighborhood. I'm new to Florida, but I have solar, I have battery, and I have an EV. What programs do I qualify for? And so Itron has a website that says, click these boxes. Aha, you have these resources behind your meter at your home. You now qualify for 5 programs. What do you say? And I say, I don't know. I'm not really sure. But this one looks like I can make, $15 a month on it. I'll check that box. And next thing you know, Itron can help you sign up, enroll, tell you what kind of battery you have. and then how much capacity, how big that is, how long it, the kilowatt hour as an example, and then you can sign up to provide services to the utility.
Okay, and then you can also dispatch a battery, I guess?
So yeah, that's core.
So are you different from a virtual power plant, a VPP?
So one of the use cases that we deliver on is virtual power plants. So we have about 2 million devices connected today out of the 100 million meters that we have deployed. We have 3 million customers. We have 30 different utility programs where we're dispatching those energy resources. And last year, we dispatched about 60 gigawatt hours. So that's the equivalent of, kind of dispatching 61 gigawatt nuclear power plants for 1 hour. So that gives you a sense of how we deploy virtual power plants without actually owning or operating or building any nuclear or gas or coal facilities at all.
Great.
And that's really the core of the value proposition is how do we move this energy transition forward, take advantage of all that flexibility that sits at the edge, so that way we don't have to build in the traditional sense, central generation.
So it sounds like you have approximately like 1% of the United States. Did you say 3 million, something like that?
3 million devices are connected.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Not 3 million people okay, but so 3 million devices. And it was how many?
I think 2 million customers, and we have.
I'm not sure how many houses are in the US, but it might be something like 2 million. I don't know.
Yeah, so Itron is somewhere on the order of like about 60+% of the market in terms of where our metering and technology is located with networks. So we have about 70% of all the major metropolitan areas where you have, high density population areas.
Okay.
And that's from a metering perspective. Yeah.
So if I go to New York City then, or what cities would I go to? I guess I've been in places where your meters are working.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm from Denver, Colorado. So we have work with that utility that has 8 states. So we have about 3 out of 4 million new distributed grid edge intelligence meters deployed in those 8 states. New York City, we run the network for all of the electricity, measuring all the electricity in that particular city. Chicago as well, to name a few.
Great. And so is it a meter, just like a regular utility meter? Is that what we're talking about? That has extra functions, I guess I should say.
Yeah, to oversimplify, you had like these 2 terms that are float around. One is the legacy advanced meter reading, AMR. And that was nice because then the mailman wouldn't get bid anymore because he could do the meter reading from the street with some radio frequency transmitter. But now we have advanced metering infrastructure that I think for the most part, Itron pioneered back in about 2007. And here we are in 2025 deploying what the industry likes to call AMI 2.0. This is grid edge intelligence. It's distributed intelligence. And what's really unique about that is that we happen to be sitting here in Pacific Gas and Electric territory. And these new meters have the ability to honor 3 out of the 6 million customers in Northern California still have a 100 amp main distribution panel like I used to in Pacifica, California.
Sure.
And I had 2 EVs and I had 3.5 kilowatts of solar and I bought a heat pump and yikes, like I'm really starting to reach that 120% rule on my main distribution panel. So the meter knows that I have a limited capacity and the meter's talking directly to the EV charger. And it's constantly measuring the solar and the heat pump. And once it starts to see that EV charger asking 50, 60 amps, it kindly asks it in near real time, please settle down. Let's go down to 8 amps. And then when the air conditioner turns off, when the dryer turns off, the electric dryer, then that car has the ability to start charging at full capacity, all by way of the meter communicating to that particular DER, if you will.
Oh, great. So it is like an energy management system too.
Yes. Specifically, you can look in the NEC codebook and it's called autonomous load following or automated load management.
Oh.
And so that's very important for utilities who kind of live in that Bible, that NEC codebook to reference.
Great, great. Yeah, I know like when you go to charge your car and there's a whole bunch of car chargers, if nobody else is there, your car gets as much as it can take. But if they're all full, you get less. Like it divides it up amongst different cars. So I guess your equipment would do all that kind of stuff too.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's nice because then you and I and your audience can pay less on our energy bills because we don't have to pay to upgrade that transformer from 100 kVA to a 500 kVA. You can just be smart about how you do the charging. Same thing applies to solar as well, just in a different direction.
So how would somebody check to see, or do people just have an Itron meter and not know about it?
Most people do. Like I talked to my parents in Chicago and I say, can you tell me what type of meter you have? And they said, where's my meter? And I said, okay, walk out the door to your left, keep going, and that's right there. And take a look. And sure enough, there's an Itron meter there.
Okay, great. I'm going to go check mine.
Now, to your point, Denver's a good example of this, where recently they sent a notice and they said, hey, we want to let you know that your old meter is about to be replaced, and here's the value proposition behind it. You know, we want to engage you as a consumer. We want you to participate. We want you to, be incented and motivated and sign up for this program and make it worth your time. And, these new meters even have the ability to not only talk to cars and EV chargers and solar and batteries, but it can talk to your personal device to say, oh, geez, Nick, somebody's at your house right now and they're charging at the wrong time of day. You're on time of use. It's 4 to 7 p.m. They're using all the energy now when it's triple the price. And so then I can send a text to my son and say, are you doing the dishwasher right now? Can you please do that at 7:01 p.m. instead of, at 7 or at 6:59? So that's helping to really engage with the customers so we can help with energy awareness as well as just, energy savings.
Okay. So let's say I go home tonight and I look at the meter and I was like, oh, it's an Itron. And then I want to do all this cool stuff like you were talking about and, get extra EV chargers and, do some energy management, stuff like that. How do I do that?
So as I mentioned, the first step would be to go to your utility website or wherever is the best place for you to communicate with your electric utility and to see what type of programs they have.
Like PG&E?
Yes. And PG&E will have a list of programs and they will have one coming soon if it's not already there to say, hey, we have a program. It's called EV Connect. If you have a 100 amp panel, but you'd like to follow the edict of Governor Newsom and purchase an EV, but you're limited, why don't you sign up for this program? So that's one way that Itron can help the consumer by way of, running a utility program.
Great. Yeah, what I really want to get is a bi-directional EV that I could use as an energy storage system.
Yes, and that is all technically feasible today. We just have challenges with things like vehicle OEM, warranty concerns, and a lot of consumers don't want to have that negative high friction impact because, you'd have to tell us what your motivation and interest would be to use your vehicle. And I don't want to take all of your energy, even if I can give you $50 on bill credit, because I didn't know that tomorrow you have to go to the store or run to the doctor. So you'd have to have a really good customer journey mapped out in order to make that happen.
Well, one of my EVs has 85 kilowatt hours and no warranty, 10 years old this year. And that would be really neat if I could do that. But I don't think the manufacturer wants me to do that. They want me to buy a new one and a power wall and all that kind of stuff. And then I did get an old Nissan Leaf, and that one does have the ability. I just need to get the charger. And I know like there's Fermata Energy and Wallbox, but I'm not really sure, even if I got one of those chargers, if PG&E would let me do an interconnection.
So I understand that some utilities that are a little bit more at the edge and they have people, consumers like you that are interested and motivated, they do have early pilots. And as a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure they have at least one V2G pilot. Now, whether or not, you can get in on time to get into the queue is another story, but there's certainly a lot of utilities like them.
And I'm not too worried about running out of battery or, all that. Like one of the things that I could do is I could set it for different times of the day. Like during this time of the day, I don't want to go under this many kilowatt hours, and this time of the day, and I want to have this many kilowatt hours when I leave in the morning. Or maybe I could set it to do something like, I only want to let you use between 5 kilowatt hours or 10 kilowatt hours, which might help the grid a lot, and 5 kilowatt hours out of 85, it's like not that noticeable.
That's exactly right. And that's what I mean by this operating envelope. So if you as a consumer can put that envelope, which actually can reside on the meter, to say, okay, Sean operates and lives his life like this, and he has this much energy available at the edge of the grid for the grid benefit, and he wants to be compensated for sharing what he can offer. And we know that Monday through Friday, he's willing to offer 20 kilowatt hours per day, as an example. Then you can have a really nice automated program that you can enroll in. I think one of the fears that we all have as consumers, and I think we have when we're running programs for utilities, is you always want to have a buffer. It's like whenever you install a battery and you deploy for a utility, or if you're a solar and battery integrator, you always want to have like a 40% state of charge buffer at a minimum, because you can use 60% or the top half of it, but you always need the bottom half in the event the unexpected, grid reliability challenges or a natural disaster, weather event. You want that for backup power and resilience. Similar thing in your car, but you just need to go to the emergency room if, my daughter has strep throat or whatever it might be, right?
I always thought too that they probably could have some app that works on your phone and it tells where you are. And if you're 100 miles away, it doesn't matter. They could run it down a little bit more than if you were right there at home and in case of emergency and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, those are all possibilities, but it all depends on, I think, scaling programs and consumer willingness to participate.
Yeah. And then there's a lot of people, they have like more than one car at the house, and, there's lots of different reasons. So I remember, I think a long time ago, before they had all this kind of cool stuff, I think there was some movie where all the appliances, like the toaster and the coffee maker, had some chip in it and they all went evil. How far are we from that?
Well, I can't speak to the evil part, but what I can say is that there seems to be a resurgence in what we call HEMS, home energy management systems. And you've got kind of the hyperscalers that are finding their way into our living rooms. Like you've got Amazon, Alexa, and
Sure, yeah.
Echo, or whatever they call it. You've got Google Home, you've got Apple HomeKit. And these are these hubs that have the ability to communicate and, connect to your refrigerator or dishwasher or TV or speakers. And so we are actively, even within Itron, working with these organizations to say, well, gosh, there's a voltage problem on the grid in this neighborhood. I can see the lights are starting to dim because there's a voltage sag, because people are asking too much energy right now. What if I automatically can call upon this little tiny energy manager in the house to turn off the dishwasher, or to, modify and change the devices? So this is all technically feasible today. I think the one open item is, which language or communications protocol do we pick in order to talk to everything, right? It feels like sometimes we're in a home, but we're in 3 different or 4 different countries, because we can speak 2030.5 over here, OCPP over there, OpenADR over here, and it's just kind of a heterogeneous pea soup of things. And we're really big, I think, as an energy industry, on standards. Let's try to achieve a really low-cost way that's high quality in order to talk to all these devices at once.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're going to go rogue, though.
Yeah, and I think we're so early. Like I can remember, like in the earlier days of the computers and stuff like that. If you had one brand of computer, you can open up your picture on this other brand of computer, and now it just seems it all works. You just send somebody a file, and you don't go like, do you have a Mac? Do you have Windows? Do you have Linux? It all seems to work, and we're just really early. I think like the industry that you're in is fascinating and is going to take off. And I think that probably some of the things that are holding it back is even things like policy. Like, do you have problems with policy, like they don't allow you to do things maybe that would be helpful?
Yeah, or I mean, regulators and policymakers, I think one of the most important things we can do as an energy industry, and from where I sit within Itron, is to kind of share what technology is available and how it can benefit society and ratepayers. And I think that's really core. Now, on the flip side, you have a lot of regulators that are recently saying, how do we have a social equity approach? How do we accommodate the underserved communities? How do we enable data access for everyone, not just, the affluent communities that can afford, certain types of energy resources? And so this is I think a really positive area where regulators are basically saying, okay, here's the meter data and here's how we can inform and empower people to know that they have basically what I would call an electricity leak, like phantom loads, like you're wasting energy because your well pump is broken, and you should be informed of that so you stop wasting $100 a month, as an example.
Yeah. And people, I guess, can get paid, right? Or, get credits on their bill, things like that. So if I turn up or down my thermostat, or, like make the dishwasher turn on at a different time, all that kind of stuff. Or even if it's the grid gives a signal where it's like, now's the time, and some kind of AI or some kind of algorithm in there will say like, oh, this person has agreed to change their thermostat, or they're not even home, or maybe you can approve with a pop-up message, something like that. And when you dispatch your battery, like a virtual power plant, you can essentially make money.
Yeah, that's what we talk about when we say you have to design the program in the right way. And ideally, you're doing that and deploying a program where you're reaching to customers where there's actually a problem, right? So these 3 substations in this particular city are really stressed out. So how can we target these 3 neighborhoods around these 3 substations and, send them an email, send them a flyer, send them some sort of a notification to say, you'd really benefit from this program. And because you're in a constrained area, and before we rebuild your substation, you can earn X on this in some way, shape, or form by participating every month or whatever it might be. Or like you said, California, since we're kind of talking about that, and I think you and I might be seated in a similar region, has this thing called Emergency Load Response Program. And when there's a problem on the grid, we can all receive some sort of notification and respond. And ideally, it's not a reactive, but it's more of a proactive message. So that way there's actually a program that's funded that can, engage and motivate us to participate.
We interrupt you for a very important announcement. Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast has been brought to you by Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. That's right, Sean White is sponsoring his own podcast, and he wants to remind you to go check out some of his classes. You can go to SolarSEAN, that's SolarSEAN.com, and then click on the links to check out his classes. You can check out his heat spring classes, and you can also hire him to teach classes for you, like at your company, something like that. Now back to the show.
So I was wondering why some people might not want to do it. I know there's people that are conspiracy theorists and flat earthers, and they think that you're spying on them, like with the smart meters. Like I know somebody was just like, get that smart meter out of your house. You got to like get some bolt cutters and just cut that thing off. And, some people are going off grid for stuff like that. And then it could, they worry about all these devices talking to each other and Alexa. And then they're carrying around a phone, which would be the ultimate device to spy on somebody. It's like, if you're really that scared, you shouldn't be carrying around a phone. But do you run into people like that?
Yeah, and people have all sorts of concerns. Privacy is a real, concern that people have, without a doubt. I think there are, with a good education and a good understanding of, how we're trying to all work together as a society to move in the right direction, there's always the customer choice of opting out. And that's a very powerful part of the tool set.
Yeah, and then like sometimes it's just hard to explain to people. It's like, nobody wants to know what your thermostat is set at today. Like, even if the data was like completely public, it's like, who really cares? And, like some people just are a little bit paranoid, I think. And so how do you see this evolving? Like, where do you think this will be in a decade?
So I think for one is the people talk in blanket broad brush strokes, and they say all across the United States, this thing is happening. But the reality, based on where I've been sitting for the past 25 years, is that all this energy resource, new technology is being adopted in different pockets. And so in the beginning, it's like I was saying, it's this town, it's this city, it's this electric feeder, it's around this substation, because you're starting to see a wave of heat pumps being installed. Or we've got this new thing with mini split heat pumps that are coming to the US market after being in Central and South America and Asia for many years. It's fascinating to watch. And so those are the areas where you start to see, wow, we did not design the grid to consume this much electric load. And now that we see it, it's a two-part, and I think our mind, provide visibility to the wave of energy resources coming online. With solar and battery, you have to interconnect those things with your county, your city, and your utility. So there's a report that a utility can go back to and say, aha, I see where all the PV and battery is coming on. But then you've got things like heat pumps and EVs. There's no such thing as interconnection. They just happen willy-nilly. Mm-hmm. And so this is where it's going, with enough, I think, AMI kind of being deployed, enough distributed and grid intelligence, that in 10 years, it'll be very much easier for the utilities to see where the problems are starting to creep in, as opposed to what's happening in my neighborhood today, which is we're all calling our utilities saying, an electrical engineer would say, I see a voltage sag in my home, or a lay folk would just be like, hey, my lights are dimming. And it's happening every day, Monday through Friday at 7:01 p.m. What gives? And they say, aha, I understand. Your transformer is being overloaded because we told them all to charge at 7:01 p.m. every Monday through Friday because of economic reasons. So 2 parts: visibility, see the wave, and the second part is to be able to manage those assets and motivate the customer to participate.
Yeah, I kind of think that eventually, I'm not sure, what kind of time period it would be, but I think that what you're doing is like something that's it's just in the early phases. It's going to take off a lot. People are going to make billions of dollars. There's going to be lots of coders with renewable energy experience that understand solar, that took my classes, things like that, that'll be working on all of this stuff. And it's super important. And this grid that we have, like, a lot of people think that it's not enough, it's not strong enough, there's not enough copper between here and there because everybody's going to have an electric vehicle. But really, it's just a network. And instead of all coming from one place, it's coming from every place now with the solar. And then we have like huge batteries in our cars. And maybe our network doesn't need to be even as big. Like, if the average 200 amp service uses about 10,000 kilowatt hours a year, and maybe if it has solar, it makes that much. And even if it had no solar at all, 10,000 kilowatt hours per year at 240 volts is less than 5 amps on average, which is kind of amazing. But if we could just shift things around and move them around and have some storage and things like that. And then I think, we've got all of this AI, and we've got all of these appliances. And as people buy new refrigerators and washing machines and dishwashers and things like that, that they will be smarter than we are and know how to change their cycles and turn on at different times and, rotate at different frequencies. And I think that it's just going to get so much smarter, and it's kind of like what you're doing, virtual power plants, distributed resources, all of these electronics, inverter-like electronics, because inverter just means DC to AC, but also you have AC to DC. And when you're even talking about like a voltage sag, I was thinking, with our battery, maybe people will even like kind of isolate their sine waves from the grid sine waves and get them through their own inverter and be off by a half a cycle per second or something like that. There could be so many different ways to network this stuff. And I think that we are just kind of, back sitting there with and Henry Ford inventing the car. We're just like so early in all of this stuff. And maybe some of what I'm thinking about might be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years in the future. But it's kind of amazing when the future comes.
Yeah. And at the same time, Sean, I'd say that, I've been saying that for the past, 20 years. It's early days. But oftentimes I feel like the future is in front of us right now in a lot of areas. And I gave that example of, what we're doing here in Northern California. That's pretty future state, but now it's just a matter of seeing that scale and that adoption of the 3 million consumers and whether or not that's going to take. But another really good example of the future being here now, I think, is what we're doing in Staten Island, New York City, where they have an air quality challenge. And a lot of the diesel buses, school buses that take kids to school every day are being kind of decommissioned, and now they have investment to run all of them on kind of clean, non-burning, EV buses. But we forgot that they're requesting a lot of current, they're requesting a lot of energy, but that's a 40-year-old 100 kVA transformer that's sitting in that old parking lot, and it's probably got some rust on the box, and we're just not in a position to do an upgrade. Underground in New York City, replace the copper, like you said, replace the transformer. That's going to take, 3 to plus years in order to do that. But the school buses are here now, and we need to send them on their way. Gosh, my kids are going to school in less than 20 days. School is starting again. So we have a solution today that can just autonomously throttle. When all 20 buses are plugged in, they don't need to be dumb. They don't need to all ask for 40 amps at the same time. They can stagger themselves, and that's in fact what is happening in 2025 today in order to enable a city like New York to decarbonize.
Yeah, and then you can also get some battery packs there too. Like I've noticed that a lot of the places where I charge my cars have megawatt hour scale battery packs at the car chargers.
Yes.
And I imagine those battery packs, besides, sipping in that electricity at, maybe when it's less expensive or just, more off peak or when there's less cars there, they're probably also doing some ancillary services like, helping out the grid and maybe, changing the power factor or, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Frequency regulation. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a really good term. I think that's been floated around a lot, but I think it's starting to become really much more valuable, which is the concept of flexible interconnection. Because oftentimes you and I and the audience might be interested in buying a fancy new thing. I'm going to be extreme and say, I want to put a data center in my backyard. And they'll be like, sorry, that's impossible. Like, you do not have enough energy for that or enough capacity to be able to, use that much energy. But you are able to sign and interconnect in a flexible way, meaning you can't ask for all 10 megawatts right now at the same time. But like you said, you can spread that out over the day, over the week, over the month. That's sized in a way that matches, the grid capacity.
When you were just talking about the data center, I kind of had an idea, and I don't know if this would be crazy or not, but could we have distributed data centers? Like instead of having all these servers in some huge building that's the size of 10 football fields in Virginia, could everybody just have a couple of things in their house? I mean, would that work?
I'm not a data center designer, and there are certain economies of scale without a doubt. But what I think you're suggesting, more distributed services, which in theory sounds like it's a possibility. And we see that happening today with new innovative technology with nuclear, right? These are small micro type of turbines and plants. So I suppose anything's possible, but I can't speak to data center.
Just like solar, it's like economies of scale and all that. Well, you do have residential solar. Costs a little bit more, but even say that they put it inside of the inverter, like you could go, I'm going to buy this inverter that has a server module in there. I'm going to make some extra income.
Yeah. And actually, that's one of the things that really motivated me about what Itron is doing is that for 20 years, I've been installing tiny little gateways and I'm running Ethernet cable through the house and I'm poking holes in the roof and I'm trying to connect it to the Wi-Fi or connect it through a LAN cable and say, oh, now I can see my solar inverter and I can use my app and I see that, oh, okay, good. I produced 40 kilowatt hours yesterday. That was a lot of effort for me to get to that end outcome. But today it's like, take out the old meter, put in the new meter, and there's an embedded Linux server gateway already built in, and you just have to connect it to the device and off you go.
Awesome.
So I think that's where the future is going. It's just kind of recognizing you've got all these components that need to be patched together, but today we can really unify those things and make it more cost effective and higher quality.
I just got another idea too, is it could sort of be like energy storage. So like, let's say that I could get a solar system for my house and they got rid of net metering here where I live. And they're probably going to get rid of it in different places. And I wish when they get rid of things, they would do it gradually instead of all at once, but they tend to do it all at once, but that's a different story. But instead of a battery, what if I had a server? And so like that extra energy at noon when I'm not home that I can't export and get credit or get good credit for, I'm just blasting it into this server and it's, doing something. It's like renting it out to AWS, Amazon Web Services, or maybe it's, doing some crypto thing or something like that, or whatever, a Gmail server. And that would be like sort of like energy storage.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what we call, dynamic pricing and being able to use energy at the right time. So stay quiet during the high demand hours when things are expensive, but then start, pulling in that load, using that energy when the prices are low or negative.
Yeah.
A great example of that would be there's so much solar in Australia right now that it's not uncommon in South Australia, Adelaide area, as we've been seeing over the years. You look at solar noon or between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. every day when the sun is shining the brightest. And you look at the baseball fields, you look at the football, soccer, rugby fields, and all the stadium lights are shining, burning bright. You're like, what is going on here? It's the middle of the day. That's exactly it. They need to balance the grid and they need, some sort of a sink, if you will, some demand in order to balance all that solar that they have.
Yeah, so why not just, do some computing? Like they're building all these big servers and I'm sure those, they could design them so they don't have to all be sitting in the same container in Virginia or wherever it is. So that's a new idea that I'm going to go patent it when we're done.
There you go. It's load and generation optimization. You can tag it. Yeah.
And even like if you don't get credit for exporting, you get a battery. If your battery's full because you're somewhere else or, you're on vacation, whatever, then you could, do that, run the load instead of just like turning on lights, which I don't know, it just on a sunny day, it seems kind of ridiculous, but I mean, I understand why they're doing that. Is it like, I think something like 65 or 70% of the people in Australia have solar in their houses? Have you heard that statistic?
It's pretty high. Yeah. There are certain pockets of the grid that have more than 50% PV penetration. So this is one of the first places that I was visiting a decade ago when batteries were starting to be there as sponges to soak up because there were so many retirees that were at home every day saying, why are my lights flickering? Why do it's not the voltage sag, but it's the voltage swell because all the solar is pumping across their wires and all their lights are getting really bright. And they're saying, I think something's broken here. Like, well, let's manage all of that PV. And that's one of the most exciting projects Itron is working on today is managing all that excess power.
Wow. That's a pretty good success story. And I think, what is it like solar in Australia too for residential? Is it something around $1 a watt, I've heard? I mean, I think it is in a lot of places. I know it was $1 a watt in the Philippines, like, I don't know, 8 years ago or something like that. So it's definitely possible to bring those prices down to where solar is even a better deal than it was before all of this tax credit stuff that people seem to be talking about that we don't like. Yeah. Well, pretty cool. So, I'm going to go get my Itron on, make sure that I'm going through all the different programs. And I guess I have to just kind of like do it from my utility. And it sounds like you're in PG&E area too. Where are you located?
Historically, I'm in between California and Colorado these days. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm headed to Colorado next week for the ACES conference, American Solar Energy Society.
Awesome.
At the time of this recording. Yep.
Right.
Great. So let's see, is there anything else that you would like to cover?
I think that's good. I appreciate you, calling me in and having this discussion. It's been super fun. And I guess I'd just say this is, really the technology is now. It's just a matter of being able to get all the consumers engaged to really realize the benefits of grid edge intelligence to do all these amazing things that you spoke of. So
Great.
thank you.
And so I hope everybody gets some Itron meters going and go check your meter right now and check your programs, figure out how you could help save yourself some money and save the grid and make your lights not flicker so much. And thanks so much, Nick Tumilowicz from Itron. And get your Itron on and go to SolarSEAN.com. That's SolarSEAN.com. And get yourself NABCEP certified, and you will understand a lot of these terms a little bit better, and you will have the best career that you possibly could. SolarSEAN.com, check it out.